Every video like this needs an introduction, and I'm doing this introduction at the end. I've been in and out of Centralia area for about 48 hours. I've got a lot of footage that I'm going to try to stitch up because I've done it at different times with different cameras, walking some. Got a little drone footage, but I can't get any more drone footage because the winds picked up and it crashed the drone, blew it into a tree and it fell 100 feet and the drone is toast. So I might have to go to some of my stock footage. But where I'm introducing what I want to share here is close to where I started, which was Oddfellow Cemetery. It's right across the road here. And I'm overlooking the valley, which was Centralia, Pennsylvania, for 150 years until it was completely abandoned. Coal runs through the entire story of this town. And the reason I wanted to introduce it here is it's so ironic that this is still considered coal country. There are active coal mines in the area, although the anthracite coal that's being mined, there's not much call for it. There's not much use for it. It's not an economic powerhouse like it used to be. And the irony is, on the ridge running northeast above Centralia now are green wind turbines that produce electricity for the area. About 5 miles between here and where I'm staying in Barnesville, you'll see a picture. I took some video footage of a conveyor over the road with big, huge letters on it. Coal keeps the lights on. And again, right above that on the ridge are these power generating wind turbines. Irony runs through a lot of what you're going to see in this. I found the fire. You'll see some footage of a couple of active smoking vents. The fire has moved on from this area. This is where it first burned into the town in the 1960s and into the early 70s. Later in the 70s and the 80s, it burnt that way and threatened a lot more homes. There have been a lot more sinkholes formed, subsistences they call it. So in the next, 20 to 30 minutes, you'll probably hear me repeat myself a couple of times because there's a few parts of what I found here, what I read about that prompted my desire to come here. This is one of those instances where you can't make this stuff up. Not really. There's a lot of human pathos in the story of Centralia. It's tragic in many ways. And I mentioned as I was walking on Railroad Avenue the day before yesterday, just as I was finishing up not long before dark, I had to find a word to describe what I was experiencing here, and the word was melancholy. There is a sense of sadness that this was home for a lot of people for a long time. The cemeteries, 3 of them are still their graves that were just dug and people buried in the last year in these cemeteries. They're well cared for. So people come and pay respects to their loved ones here. They drive through the town every day. They just can't live here anymore. And that story, sordid in a lot of ways, reminiscent of what Gene Kranz said. Gene Kranz, as played by Ed Harris in the movie Apollo 13, when everything was going wrong with Apollo 13. Gene Kranz said at one point, the LIMS lithium hydroxide canisters are round. The command modules are square. And he looked and shook his head and goes, tell me this is not a government operation. Well, a lot of what happened in Centralia was just that, a government operation. 2 different departments of the federal government fighting one another. Who's going to be in charge? Who's going to take credit? Who's going to get the blame? The stakes were pretty high here. This was more than just politics as usual. So come on with me. We're going to jump to the cemetery. We're going to do some driving around. There is some drone footage. We're going to see the graffiti highway. I'll explain a little bit about that. We're going to take a walk into the woods and see where the fire is today. and think through a little bit with Centralia, Pennsylvania. And the spiritual aspect, everything is spiritual. You hear me say that? The spiritual aspect here, it's very, very simple. If you want to pause the video and go look at Exodus chapter 20 and Leviticus chapter 19. Doesn't get much simpler than that for this. So, welcome to Centralia, Pennsylvania. As I'm saying goodbye to it, the rain has come in. It's real coarse. There's a wind blowing. It's getting colder and colder, and the sprinkles have set in. So I'm about done. And I've got all this footage that I'll have to edit, and you get to start your visit. So if you come along, I'm glad you're here. Tell me, if you would, if this is as powerful for you as it has been for me. So anyway, I've said it a lot of times over the last 2.5 days. More to come. (1962), May 27th, the day before Memorial Day, the volunteer fire department, at the request of the town council, they paid them, came out and burnt the trash. That was common. It happened all the time. Even though state law in Pennsylvania did not allow it, people did it. It knocked down the smell, it knocked down the trash, kind of got rid of the rats, because Memorial Day, the American Legion or the VFW comes out, they do an honor guard here in this cemetery, and people come and visit graves. There's all kinds of American flags on graves here. But let me turn the camera around and pan it for you. You can see these graves are taken care of. So, because people were going to be here the next day, they came out and had a controlled burn over in that area, over the way I'm pointing and over beyond my truck. They burnt the trash. They, churned it up into ashes. They poured water on it, put it out. That was out the eastern gate there, and they didn't think anything else about it. Well, turns out about 3 days later, there's flames again. The fire had started again. So they came and put more water on it. About a week later, it was burning again. They poured more water on it then. Then they churned it up. And when they churned it up, is when they found out that on one wall of the pit, and remember, this is a pit that had been mined for coal, there was a hole that exposed part of the anthracite coal seam that is under this entire area. And the anthracite coal caught fire. And that's where it started. And that started in 1962, a chain reaction of events and bad decisions, and lies and stonewalling and games between local government, state government, federal government, that you almost can't make this up. It was such a disaster. And 30 years later, it led to this entire town by eminent domain being condemned, essentially, all the houses being bought out, and everybody, other than I think 2 or 3 houses that are still here, moved out, and Centralia became a ghost town. But it all started right here. I'm going to be spending 2.5 days here, walking some areas, driving some areas, things like that. And in a lot of places where I'm going to be, you probably can't make it out in the distance yet, but I'm going to be seeing these pipes coming out of the ground that apparently there are hundreds and hundreds of them. These are boring holes that the state government, the federal government, the United States Bureau of Mines, the United States Surface Mining Association, which was a later government organization, They bored these holes to see, is the fire here? Is the fire not here? What's the temperature? Some of them were bored as vents, and in fact you'll see historical footage of steam and smoke coming out of these vents. Well, what you see right here is one of the bore holes, test holes, of which again there are probably 300 or 400 in the area that were bored over the year. And that was how they found out the fire had moved faster than they thought, in a different area than they thought. At one time, the metal here was fenced in all these vents because it was so hot that it would burn you if you touched it. So it's cloudy and I can't tell. I don't have a compass with me. This may be the east gate, which means that the fire started in the pit that was out this side of the cemetery. I brought a compass with me specifically to check some directions, and the camper is about 18 or 19 miles away in Barnesville, Pennsylvania, and I just forgot to bring it when I drove over this afternoon. But right here's where it began, in 1962. And again, that Sunday morning when they started the fire in what was a abandoned pit, nobody had a clue that that was going to set off a chain event that was going to turn this entire town into a ghost town. There are streets where you still see foundations, where you still see sidewalk markers, where the trees are overgrowing them, and they just look like pathways through the woods. Where in 1962 it was estimated they had about 700 buildings in Centralia, and about 1,600 or so people lived here. And within 30 years they would all be gone. Now there's estimate, they say there's something like 4 or 5 buildings left standing. Some of these people flat refused to move, and the government finally said, we've taken over your property. You can stay there, but you can never sell your property. You can't deed it to anybody, and when you die, no one gets it. We'll take it over then. Essentially, this entire area is owned by the government. It's all condemned land, and it's all riddled underneath with anthracite coal mine that has burned out. There's areas where they have cave-ins, they call them subsistences. And one thing that's kind of a little creepy to me is there's the chance the ground anywhere, anytime can just cave in. Yet people drive on the roads. I'm walking on it, but I'm aware of that. Maybe the people who live here, they don't really think about it. I don't know. Somewhere up here, there's a little pathways. This is where the dump was. And this is where the fire started. Right in this area. It's been filled in now, of course. The splash of color you see ahead of me, that's graffiti that's on either a vent pipe or test hole pipe. There's 2 of them right here because, again, right now I'm in the area that was the pit where the fire started. Over this way in the woods is one of the pipes that was built as a vent pipe because it actively, when the coal fire was burning, you can see the chain link around it. And the chain link was built simply because this was a true burn hazard. I'll show you some pictures. I've got some, I think, video footage and picture footage, stills of these smoking, 1 or 2 smoking while kids were playing baseball on the high school baseball diamond. And unfortunately, one of the things that happened is they weren't just smoking. This was anthracite coal, which burns very hot and is also very, very difficult once it gets going to extinguish. And it wasn't just smoke, it wasn't just steam, it was also carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, in lethal levels, by the way. Sulfur dioxide, sort of a witch's brew of toxic chemicals that the mine fire was giving out. So this is another one of the vent holes. You can see the rusted chain link fence. What was coming out of this was toxic and in fact deadly. One of the reasons people ended up having to be moved out of their homes is carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide started seeping through the ground into their cellars, into their homes. They had to have state-approved carbon monoxide monitors installed. Although they didn't have enough, they had to share them with people in the town. And these would go off all the time. And even in the dead of winter, if they went off, you had to open your windows. And it might be 10 degrees outside. Or you had to get out of your house. Because if you stayed in, some of the toxic levels of carbon monoxide were so high that they would kill you in a matter of minutes. So, right here where I'm walking around, this is where it all started. And the story is just amazing. It's one of those, frankly, rather depressing stories in some ways, but I guess I call it, do I call it human interest? Is that what kind of grabbed my attention? It made me think I want to drive, 565 miles to Pennsylvania. I don't know, the documentaries I saw online, the books I read about this, it was just an amazing, amazing story. It really wouldn't leave me alone. I wanted to come see it. And not only come see it in a way to share it with you. So, I normally shoot for about a half an hour because I know your attention span. You don't want to watch me walking around for longer than that. I don't know how long this will be. Because again, I'm going to be shooting footage for 2.5 days. I can't help but wonder, turn this around, is this rock or is there coal mixed in with it? I don't know. I drove up on what's called Big Mine Road, and several places you just looked on the side of the road, somebody else has burnt trash recently here. Which is an ongoing problem. The reason this became the town dump was the state had condemned the old dump and said you couldn't use it anymore, so people just started dumping in like 8 different locations around Centralia that were unofficial dumps, and they were unsightly, there were sanitation problems, so the town council tried to get that under control. And then they're the ones that made the decision. The 5 men on the town council paid $6 a piece, I believe was the figure, to the firemen who would come out and do the controlled burn. Later, you get into the hook that's Leviticus 19 and Exodus 20. Later, the town council members said, oh, we didn't approve that. And it wasn't a fire that we set. It must have been kids. In other words, they lied. That's what the spiritual hook is. Thou shalt not lie. And this whole tragic story is a story of one lie after another, after another, after another. And maybe that's what piqued my interest so much. Because doesn't that sound like the world we're living in right now in the United States? And what we're dealing with what we hear out of Washington and other places. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Well, I'm going to walk around some more. I'm going to drive around. I'm going to get what I call B-roll footage. And it'll eventually splice in somewhere, somehow. But this is Centralia, folks. The ghost town. And so I'm going to hang out until it speaks to me What's the story it wants me to tell? We'll see. More to come. Just down the hill at the stop sign is where Highway 61 turns to the left, and that becomes the main drag of Centralia. But right up here, up Locust Avenue, and the cross street might be Park Avenue. I don't know. They don't. The cross street might be Park Avenue, but on this corner was John Coddington's Amoco station. It was the only gas station in town. It sat right here, and he had an apartment above the gas station. Well, they knew the fire that had started that direction on the other side of town, they knew it had burned this way when he started having problems with gasoline coming out of his 9,000 gallon tanks that were underground, and they couldn't figure out why. Then he noticed in the yard next door, a man named Lamb lived there in a mobile home, and he was the guy in town who ran a motorcycle shop. They saw steam coming up in the empty lot between them, and they thought something's wrong here. So they called the Pennsylvania DEP engineer, maybe the Bureau of Mine engineers. Long story short, they came out, they dropped the thermostat down in his gasoline tank, 9,000 gallons, that they were still pumping every day. It was 135 degrees. Now, gasoline boils at 196 degrees, and by the time you get to 135 degrees, it's increasing in volume so much that it's becoming more and more explosive with every degree. They had a time bomb sitting here. So both the state and the federal government came in, shut him down, and said, you're out of business, drained his gas tank, filled it with water. I don't know if the fuel tanks are still underground here or not.
Catty corner from where I live, John Coddington operated a service station. He would have problems with gas escaping from his gas tanks. And it was discovered that the reason why the gas was escaping was because the heat of the fire was actually heating up the gasoline, causing it to expand and coming out the overflow.
The gas station apparently had been pumping gas at 130 degrees or something, an enormous fire hazard.
And it's funny, it says no parking and posted no trespassing, which is interesting because apparently the United States government has purchased all this, but there are some signs that say private property. So again, I'm sure for the few folks that stayed here, it's a touchy type situation. So you got to respect what they're asking. But right here was John Coddington's station. Across the road that way is where a young boy named Josh Dabrowski, I believe, Dabrowski, ran through his grandmother's yard. He was coming over here because John Coddington was being taken to the hospital. He had succumbed to the fumes in his cellar, and he was running through a vacant lot there. The ground opened up. He fell into a hole that went down into the mine. He screamed as he fell in. He just happened to grab a root and was holding on to the root for dear life. His cousin heard him and ran over and saw the big hole, and he got down on his belly and crawled to the hole, and he saw Josh's orange toboggan hat, reached in, happened to grab him and help pull him out of the hole. Later on, they measured it. The hole went down 300 feet deep, and at the bottom of it, it was 600 degrees Fahrenheit. And not only that, the fumes that were coming out of that hole when it opened up were so heavy with carbon monoxide that had his cousin not pulled him out, he would have probably asphyxiated in 3 or 4 minutes and died. He would have fallen down in the hole and probably burned to death as well.
The biggest and scariest incident of all involved a 12-year-old boy by the name of Todd Domboski. I seen smoke, so I went over to see if it was the mine fire, and when I did, I just fell right through.
We were over at Coddington's gas station when Todd Dumbuski ran over to us. He was covered in mud and he was screaming, and he said, "Help, help, help, my grandmother's yard fell in."
Luckily for him, he had like an orange hunting hat on, and his cousin, from what I understand, crawled over on like his, almost on his belly like a snake, and saw the orange hunting hat and just reached in and grabbed him and pulled him out.
They administered oxygen. They rushed me to the hospital for some blood gas tests. I was just covered in mud. From the intense heat, I had heavy pants, heavy shirt, a heavy coat. It was baked on. I mean, you couldn't go to a car wash and blast me off. It was just baked on.
If he did not hold on to those roots, he would have slid down a gangway or down the slope, which was about 300 feet in depth. And if I recall, the temperatures recorded were anywhere from 400 to 600 degrees at the bottom of the hole.
It's pretty. It's very, very, very rugged. And let me pan up. The camera angle isn't going to show you, but there are much more rock outcroppings there. But that slope's damn near vertical. And the honest to goodness truth is, 30 years ago, I might have been adventurous enough to try it. 2 months out of surgery and standing here in a forest in Pennsylvania all by myself, no, not a chance. I'm gonna skirt around this way and we'll just see. Maybe I'll catch a smoking vent, maybe I won't. But it's this area. It's this area where the fire has moved. Centralia from right here is behind me that way. Centralia is about 2.5 miles, maybe 3 miles to the southwest of where we are. Behind your view going that way is the township northeast of here called Shenandoah and Girardville. And eventually, those that are being honest and scientific have said there's nothing we can do to stop this fire. It's going to eventually burn itself that way. There's enough coal in the ground, and the geography of this rock is that it will get oxygen, so there's nothing to put it out. In fact, an anthracite coal mine fire, according to every single mining engineer that I read or every former miner, they were all in unison. You don't put it out with fly ash barriers, with water, with sand, with what they called chum. I think not chum. It was sand, fly ash, and other materials that wouldn't burn that were pumped down into the areas. They were all in agreement. An anthracite fire is so hot and will burn so ferociously that you have to dig it out. That's the only guaranteed way you can put the fire out. And the folks knew that in the 1960s. Soon after the fire started in '62, there were mining engineers and miners saying, you got to dig this out, you got to do it right now. One of the ironies and the tragedies is that one small mining company volunteered to the town council of Centralia, I'll dig it out. I'll dig it out for free. Let me keep the coal to recoup my losses, and I will put this fire out. This was within weeks or maybe a month and a half of it starting. There were voices on the town council and in the township that turned the guy down and said, no way, no how, you're trying to steal our coal. Okay, the coal is our riches. You're trying to steal it. Let me bend over here. That's anthracite coal. Right there. I'll keep that piece with me. So they turned him down and talked to the state Department of Environmental Protection that had mining engineers. Talked to the Federal Bureau of Mines in Washington. It was later on they would talk to the department, the Office of Surface Mining, that was created in Reagan's administration. And time again they circled back around to, and even tried a couple of excavation trenches. They didn't dig them deep enough. They didn't dig them long enough. So the fire went around them. And each and every time, and I'm talking in a span of 30 years here, they would almost have the fire, several times, almost have the fire under control. Anyway, they were ordered to stop because the project was out of money. In other words, the project was out of the money that had been allocated for it, that had been budgeted for it. It wasn't that the state was out of money or the particular department's fund was out of money. There was no money for this to continue. There was a report of one mine engineer he worked for 20 years here on this and thought they were almost to get a handle on it. He was told to stop digging, we've run out of money, and the report is this mining engineer, this tough, rough guy, just wept because he knew that decision was going to kill the town. That's the long story here. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, probably over in Centralia, when I just kind of stop and think through the absolute catastrophe of the decisions that were made, the monetary, callous decisions that were decided upon that doomed the town. Across the road, on the northeast side of the road, and you won't see it, the GoPro doesn't have anywhere near the camera resolution, but up at the very top of this rock face, before there's some distance in the trees behind, it may not show here, there's a little hazy smoke right there. I just noticed it as I looked up, walking this way. Let me walk down a little bit. Right through the trees up there. Very, very faint, but it's clear that I see it. There's some steam rising up. So apparently the fire's on this side of the road now, moving northeast. Boy, wouldn't it be great to go up there and absolutely look at it, feel it, see how hot it feels. But in case you're wondering, this is what I'd have to crawl through. In other words, ain't gonna happen, not today. But it's definitely on that side of the road. I've just come farther up Big Mine Road, and I've actually found the path where some people have marked with tape. I've seen videos of this section right here that in the past, these vents, one right there, there's some discoloration, was actively smoking. The orange tape marks a little pathway here. Then I'm gonna walk it a little bit. It may be worth giving a look. And I see the fire. I saw a little bit on the other side of the road, but right here, I see the vent. Let me give you a wide angle. Right there. It's dim, but the steam's rising. So I did find the mine fire. And this is actually, it's a pretty steep little scramble, but this is doable, I think. If the camera shakes, sorry. That's me trying not to bust my rear end. Just pull myself up on these roots. It's kind of muddy. You can see it right there. Okay. Oh man, it is almost dead straight up here, so I'm like pulling myself, oh gosh, I'm gonna pull myself off my feet. Oh, come on, baby. right there. You see the orange, sulfur dioxide. And it's a misnomer to call it smoke. It's really steam, okay? 300 feet below me, the coal fire is burning at about 650 degrees Fahrenheit. This is rising up and hitting groundwater, and it's coming out as steam. I'm not going to scramble up the last 5 feet and try to lean over and put my hand in there, because as much as that steam, water vapor, there's also carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide is coming out of that hole right there, and it's coming out in lethal concentrations. The concentration of the carbon monoxide, the fire was checked over and over and over in places like this. It's like 1,000 parts per million, okay? 50 parts per million is enough to kill a human being. You do the math. The concentration of carbon monoxide in a place like this could render me unconscious in a matter of 2 or 3 minutes. So I can smell it from here. You can smell the sulfur smell. So this is as close as I'm going to get, but you can see the steam rising there. There's the fire, folks. It's been burning since 1962, and it's going to burn for 200 more years, although it won't be here in 200 years. It'll be 20 miles, 30 miles, 40 miles northeast of here. Okay, mission accomplished. I've seen where the fire is now, and I guess it's burning from right here. Let me carefully turn around. I don't want to fall, because I am way up above the road there. And I drove maybe a half a mile up the road, so the real faint steam I saw was about a half a mile down that way. So the fire's burning from here at least across the road to there. Makes me wonder if this road will eventually be closed like parts of Highway 61 were, because the fire burned all the coal out and it took the foundation up from underneath it, and it started crumbling and cracking and holes started opening up. I don't know. So, more about the fire to come. I'm glad I saw this. I'm glad I found it, because this, shows it's moving. I'm glad I saw it on the other side of the road. It makes me wonder, if you live in Shenandoah or Girardville or River Run, you know that the fire's burning towards you. You live there and you know this fire's burning toward you. What are you thinking? Wow. It's the real deal, I guess, for them. Anyway, now let's go further into Centralia. And that means I got to figure out how to get down. It was hard enough getting up this. So, not going to record this part. More later. You notice the street's got a big median. It's grown up here. This is Railroad Avenue, which back in the 1850s, this was where the railroad station that came from the Reading line through town. And when it was dug up, it just kind of grew out. But on the side of the road here is another part that's indicative of how strange a feeling it is, because you can still see curbstones on the side of the road, and up here there's still a concrete footer that may well have been the railroad depot. I don't know. Or maybe just a sidewalk outside of a business or something. It looks like an abandoned path just back through the woods, right? Was where homes and businesses were. And every street, aside from, again, the maybe 7 or 8 homes that are still here, it's getting to where people are coming home from work, and I saw a couple of people pulling into houses. They don't look like they want to talk to anybody, and I'm not gonna go up and ask to speak to them. But in places like this, you know, the curbs are still here. Some of the sidewalks are still here. All the towns are gone. All the houses are gone, rather. It is just an incredibly odd feeling. There's a video game or a cult-like video or something that I've forgotten the name of, Safe Hill or something, I don't know. People talk about this town, Centralia was part of the pattern for this, again, video, whatever it is, I'm not really sure. And that's where some of the impetus for people to come and kind of play tourists, little like I ran into with some of the video at Milledgeville, Georgia, the Georgia State Asylum that was abandoned, people coming and breaking in and oh, isn't this wild, there's ghosts and all that. Some people are doing that here, which I can't help but think is massively disrespectful. This is not a sideshow. This is a real sad story of a small town that was people's homes for generations. And again, one blunder after another with the coal mine fire. Took everything they held dear. On this side of the road, you still see the sewer, the storm drain, and a sewer manhole. There's, you know, still some sort of pavement there, and again, it's all just being reclaimed and going back to the wild. But some perspective can be gained, and I'm going to have to insert these into the video so you can see some of the historical photos. A lot of them are black and white, some of them aren't great resolution, but they give you an idea. Instead of an overgrown road kind of being swallowed back up by the woods and the weeds, you see what it once was, and what was taken away from the folks. I mean, that's part of it. So it's rather difficult actually to explain. I'm going to look at this. It's a little difficult for me to explain what it feels like. And I don't want to be melodramatic or anything. I've done enough research because, you know, this place has been on my mind for probably 2.5 months, maybe 3 months now. And now I'm actually seeing it, you know, in person. Melancholy. Used to be when the clergy, during the pandemic, the clergy would have a Zoom call just to check in with one another. Charlotte Presbytery, how are we doing? Not everybody took advantage of it, but at least a dozen of us for a while, and it grew into a group of about 5 or 6 that we did it for over a year together, because we found a good support system there. One of the things we would do, we would check in with one another, and the little exercise we did was pick one word that kind of places you in the world, in life, the universe, everything, whatever. And you'd have to think about it. You know, not just willy-nilly throw a word out, but what really, I can only choose one word, so what's the word I choose? And you have to think that through. Railroad Avenue continues to go down that way. That's going southwest. So that would be the part of the train line that goes to Ashland. The other way would be the line that goes to Reading, Pennsylvania, up towards through Bloomsburg, the Schuylkill River, that area. And again, State Highway 61, which was the main drag, is up at that stop sign. And this wide boulevard type road with nothing on it. So I was talking earlier about how we choose a word, and I think as I process it, Centralia is melancholy, very much so. The documentary that I watched, that I'm going to use some footage of it, was The Town That Was. And that's very telling, because it sure isn't the town that is. I've said this before, I'll say it again, probably it's going to get monotonous. More to come. It's an odd looking image you're looking at, isn't it? A very wide street, almost like a boulevard. There's concrete curbs on either side that once were leading into people's front yards. This is West Park Avenue in Centralia. It's eerie, very much so. And because this was once a small town, but a thriving town right here in Pennsylvania, coal country. And it is so odd. It's like one of those dystopian movies. What happens when all the people are gone? What happens after the bomb hits? Something like that. But it happened for real here. I met an older gentleman about a half an hour ago and chatted with him down at the municipal building, the firehouse. That ironically, and I didn't want to shoot video while he was here. He was a little suspicious until we chatted. And I asked him right away, did he know if John Licensor Jr. still lived here in town? And the fact that I knew a name, the fact that I could name drop, and all of a sudden we were having a conversation. He lives up in Aristas, Pennsylvania. It's 2 miles that way. And he's coming down to do some handyman work on the firehouse because the fire engine, the volunteer fire company, still responds to fires. It says municipal building there, but you can see where the letters Centralia have been pulled off. The zip code went away. A couple of the very few residents still living here were very upset about that. But it made sense. They have to use the Ashland zip code now, and Ashland's about 5 miles down the road. They can still put Centralia on their letters, but that only applies to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 houses that I counted as I've been driving around. That's all that's left. And they're the ones that left. They refused to go, and the government essentially said, you can stay till you die. Nobody can inherit your land. The gentleman I was talking to told me one elderly lady who lived one street down, I believe, here from Park Avenue on the east side of Locust. She just died last winter, and the state came in and took her house down and demolished it just about a month ago. So what's happening is that people die. The state's coming in after that and taking their houses down. That's the end of the story of Centralia. The beginning I've already told you about. May 27, 1962, at Oddfellow Cemetery. Burning trash against the law, but hey, everybody does it, right? The burning trash ignited through a hole in the trench because it was an open pit, and there was a hole into a coal seam. The burning trash ignited the anthracite coal seam, and this entire area is just a honeycomb of abandoned coal mines everywhere. The older guy I was talking to told me that he said I should go up to the next road as well. There's a big concrete rubble area. where I guess the state has filled in concrete filler material because they had a subsidence, they call them, there just this past year. Just a cave-in, a sinkhole opened up about 100 feet deep. So they filled that in, but apparently the state has mining engineers and other inspectors that on a regular basis are coming through here looking for indicators that parts of the coal mines, the abandoned gangways and seams of coal, might collapse again. I find it strange that this is apparently a commuter road now. 2 days ago, I was here right at 5 p.m. and there was a lot of traffic. And they were, forget the speed limit, they wanted to get home. And here I was in a place I didn't know very well, so they were about to mow me down. But they just come through and don't think about it, and yet the street I'm standing on, 65 feet below me, maybe as much as 400 feet below me, there's probably abandoned coal mine areas because they mined every bit they could find from 1852 or so all the way up. Well, there's still a Keystone mine going that way. There's still the Redding anthracite mine that way. They're still mining in areas now. They're not digging. It's more strip mining. And you can tell that because it's just insane what they're doing to the land. An old friend of mine works in an industry that's related to the coal industry. And he says, oh, there are all kinds of regulations. They clean it back up. They have to do that. Cleaning coal can be clean, but not real clean. And to make it cleaner takes such an amount of emissions control and money. It's always money involved that most people don't bother. It's one of the reasons why the current administration was going to open up Western lands in Wyoming, sell all that coal. We're going to sell coal again, take America back to coal. The only bid they got was 1 penny per ton of coal. That's it. You know, the industry has passed its day, and that's the reality. It's hurt people in this area because coal was the only economic driver. But it was done in such a way that the average people here, they're the ones that got hurt by it. Now, the coal companies mined right away everywhere. A lot of people came in after them and did what some called outlaw mining. Some called it pillar mining. They went into the abandoned mines themselves and dug out whatever coal they could get. There's a story of the motorcycle shop owner, Mr. Lamb. I don't remember his first name. I think David Lamb. He lived in a trailer on the other side of John Coddington's Amoco station right up there. Turns out the guy he bought his house from had gone down in his cellar, dug a hole down into the mine, and spent years mining coal, hauling it up through his cellar and selling it personally, using it himself, selling it to friends, whatever. He filled the hole back in, but he filled it in very loosely. So the Lamb family, when the mine fire got close, they had carbon monoxide in their cellar at lethal levels, and no one could figure out, well, it was just percolating like up through coffee grounds through this outlaw mine that had been dug from the cellar. So all of those pieces sort of came together in almost a sense of a perfect storm. And for 30 years, and then the real story is for 30 years, the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, the residents here lived in fear. Would they go to sleep and not wake up? That's literally how scared they were about the carbon monoxide. Would they lose all the value in their home? And for most of them, their home was the only asset they really had. They learned over that 30-year period, you don't ever, ever trust a government official. A man named Tom Larkin was co-president or co-leader of a citizens group here, trying to get the government to help. And he and a woman named Joan I want to say Garibaldi. I probably got the wrong last name. They went to Washington. They went to Harrisburg. They got friends and neighbors to make a coalition with them. They developed enemies because there were some people saying, leave this alone. Don't make a scene. Don't make a stink about it. Tom Larkin was interviewed in a documentary done by this, and I'm going to put that footage in. Probably I'll just insert it right here. And in his new home near Mount Carmel, an older Tom Larkin says, we learned with good reason not to trust the government because for 30 years they lied to us over and over and over. He said, I don't trust government at all. And he said, with good reason.
If they don't die out, they're going to be forced out. I really believe that. And I hope they go kicking and screaming. I really do. The government promised them that they would not be forced out of their homes. This is what the government said. But I think, government is government, and government lies through its teeth. I don't trust government, and I have good reason not to. Because for years, government lied to us in Centralia. They lied to us.
And I understand that. Their congressman back in the 60s and 70s was a man named Flood, and he loved to make a splash, and he loved to kind of glad hand and come visit people. He came in time and time again promising this, promising that. Nothing happened. The State Bureau of the Department of Environmental Resource, I believe they're called, came in and said, well, we can help some, but the federal government's going to have to help. The Federal Bureau of Mines in Washington, during the 70s with the Carter administration, and even with the Nixon administration, they decided that we'll do studies, we'll look at it, but they didn't promise anything. In 79, Dick Thornburg became the governor of Pennsylvania, and they asked him for help. But if you recall, in 1979, Governor Thornburg had 3 Mile Island down in Harrisburg to worry about. Centralia was a drop in the bucket. He didn't really care. When you get to 80, and by that time the fire has burnt and obviously moved, and right in this area, homes are endangered. Ronald Reagan is elected, gets to the White House. The Department of the Interior oversees the Bureau of Mines, and at that time oversees a new organization called the Office of Surface Mining, which strip mines come into their purview. Deep mines are in the Bureau of Mines, and as happens in the federal government, these two entities clash. Who's in charge? Is this my territory, your territory? Who gets this money? Who gets that money? Sound familiar, doesn't it? Well, Reagan appoints as Secretary of the Interior James Watt, and he's going to be the big boss over both of these organizations. You may not remember James Watt. I do. I remember when he was appointed. I remember he's the nutcase that wanted to pave the Appalachian Trail so that he could see the views from his leisure van. He was into that. He wanted to open up the Smoky Mountains. And again, forget about hiking trails, pave them. Let's let this open up for people can drive through and, look out and whatever. The traffic jams in Yosemite and Yellowstone and all that today, blame James Watt. Well, he's the guy that was in charge of these two entities fighting over who was in charge and who would essentially foot the bill for Centralia. And that's where, as I mentioned, as I was walking over near the active smoking vent, the cost-benefit analysis equation came into play. And essentially it was, there's no benefit to spending the money here. Let it burn, buy them out, force them to move. 30 cents on the dollar was the average. If you look at the aggregate of people who were bought out, I saw a picture of a woman. Her house was appraised at $36,000 and change. The government offered her $11,000 and change, and they said, take it or leave it. And if you leave it, you're done. We're not going to help you.
We had our home for 16 years, our entire married life. We had put all our money into it. Jim's mother passed away. We put that into it, which hurt him very deeply. To put all that money into the home to remodel it, to make it that it's comfortable for us. And then a few, not even 2 years later, to find out that we were going to have to be moved out of it. We had signed an agreement with the government. But when the time came, we saw that what we were getting for the home was $11,000, which people thought we were getting a lot of money. It was supposed to be, it's worth $36,000, but we were offered $11,000 for it. They took off depreciation for this and that, and you ended up with that, and you took it or you stayed there. And we definitely couldn't stay.
What were they going to do? But then later on, this man told me that they went to an appraisal by square footage. And so some people that had bigger houses had taken lesser values. Some people had smaller houses, but they sold it. They moved down the road a mile, built another house, and then later sold that one as well. Who knows if all of that's true or not? I don't. But that hits the crux here in Centralia. That's the key to this whole tragedy, and that's what it is. Walking these streets the last 2.5 days has been a melancholy feeling. And when it comes down to, sometimes you have to kind of, well, what's the Bible passage that matters? Or how do you kind of tweak it and fit it in? No problem here. Exodus 20, the 9th commandment, thou shalt not bear false witness. Or jump over to the way Leviticus chapter 19 says it, thou shalt not lie. And the people who lived here and lost their homes and saw this coal mining town abandoned to what it is now, they were lied to for over 30 years. Lie after lie after lie. And almost every one of those lies was based on money. Follow the money, I say that. It's a cliche, but it's true. You know, there wasn't enough cost-benefit analysis done or ratio to make it worthwhile to spend money here. They ultimately spent more. Of course, the penny wise, pound foolish nature of it, you know, they couldn't afford to dig the trench as far as it needed to be. So the fire jumped it. And then later on, they had to dig more, or it was going to cost more. They couldn't do that, so they ended up having to buy people's houses out. The fly ash barrier was temporary at best because it was untested technology, and there were mining engineers that said it'll never work in an anthracite mine. A bituminous mine is flat, so it would work there. Anthracite mines can be as much as 45 degrees. They can go from 65 feet underground to 450 feet underground, and then they can come back up. And the mining engineers will say, you'll never fill all those voids. You will never suffocate this fire. It won't work. The only way to do it is to dig it out. And as I read through this on at least 2 occasions, I may be right in saying on 3 occasions, 3 different companies said, if you hire us, we'll dig it out. We'll take care of it. Some people will lose their homes. At one point, there was an estimate 109 homes would have to be abandoned and destroyed because where I'm standing would have been a 100-foot deep, 600-foot long, 200-foot wide trench dug right here to dig the fire out. And it was said, nope, we can't afford you. Sorry. So not being able to afford it then, they could afford later on for the town to be abandoned. That's the story here. Thou shalt not lie and follow the money. And doesn't that hit home right now where we live? Because in our nation's capital, call me out for being political if you want, but in our nation's capital, every single day, all we get are lies. And all we get are more schemes for people to enrich themselves. I don't get it. Everything is spiritual. I believe that. I truly do. And being here, the spiritual aspect is this area is abandoned because people were lied to and money was more important. Think about that. I'm going to walk around some more, get some more footage. May sink it in, may just put some shots in for you to see. I may not be able to fly my drone. The wind's picking up and it's rained off and on. But I do have some drone footage I'll show you so you can see from the air how eerie it looks. That what used to be a bustling small town of 1,800 people now has 4 houses left and is an abandoned no man's land. So, glad you were with me in Centralia. Food for thought for sure. Thou shalt not lie. Let's take it to heart, maybe. Okay, going to do some more walking. So we'll catch up later.